Morning, boys and girls. Here we are again on your pedagogical space to carry on our program. So we are with the session 8 today, which will be about the simple present passive, which is a revision, because you have already seen the present passive. So consider sentences A and B here, and answer questions 1 and 2, which say, let's read the sentences first. Sentence A says, students' progress is watched by parents. Sentence B, schools are visited by inspectors. Now, let's go to the questions. Who watches what in this sentence? And who visits what in sentence B, pardon? Here are the answers. Parents watch students' progress, and inspectors visit schools. Now let's look more closely to these two sentences. Parents watch students' progress, and inspectors visit schools. You notice that they are properly divided into 3 parts. 1 part, 2nd part, and 3 parts. Parents and inspectors function as the subject here. The 2nd part is the verb, which is a transitive verb. A transitive verb is a verb which needs a direct object complement. That is, you say, I eat what, I write what, I break what. That is the direct object complement. So, for instance, here, parents watch what? The student's progress, which is the object here. So, you clearly see the subject, the verb, and the object. These type of sentences are called active sentences. Why active sentences? We have a subject, a verb, and an object complement. That is, sentences with transitive verbs. There is a subject who does something. Now, let's come back to sentences A and B here. Students' progress is watched by parents. Schools are visited by inspectors. Now, if we pay attention to the verb, we will see. Okay, let's come back to the students, to the subject first. Students' progress and schools, we said, are the subject. And then the verb is here. You notice the verb is composed of 2 parts here, which is to be plus the past participle. Is and are represent the auxiliary to be here, and watched and visited are the past participles of watch and visit. By inspectors and by parents, which constitute the agent by whom the action is done here. And this is why we call this type of sentences passive sentences, because in reality the subject here does nothing. The action is done by the agent. Now, let's see more closely these two types of sentences. Active, passive, the difference. What is the difference between active and passive sentences? Let's analyze these these sentences first. Parents watch students' progress, and inspectors visit schools. Now, as you see, parents is the subject here. The subject does something. What does the subject do? The subject watches students' progress. Parents watch students' progress. And the same for the second sentence. Inspectors visit schools. So we have a subject who does something, and we have the subject which is the doer of the action. What is the doer? It is the one who does something. You say play, player, football, footballer. And another characteristic of this type of sentences is that the focus, that is the attention, importance, is on the doer of the sentence, of the action partner. This is why we call them active sentences. There is action. Let's go to this column now. Students' progress is watched by parents, and schools are visited by inspectors. What happens here? Does students' progress do some action? The subject does nothing here. It is something that happens to the subject. You see here, we have the subject who does something, but in this sentence, we have something that happens to the subject. The subject receives the action. He undergoes the action. The subject in this sentence is not the doer of the action. The focus, the attention is on the action. Here, importance is given to the action that happens and not on the subject. This is why we call this type of sentences passive sentences. Passive sentences, because the subject, in fact, is passive. The subject receives the action. Now, what difference is there between the verbs in the active sentences and those in the passive sentences? We have active sentences here, active and passive. Let's go back to the two verbs, watch and visit. You remember in those two sentences, watch and visit. In the active, here is the verb, watch, and here is the second verb, visit. The verb, you notice, is in the present simple. Whereas in the passive, the verb becomes is watched and are visited. Now, let's first see what tense we are talking about. We have present simple here, which is exemplified, which is demonstrated by the present simple of the auxiliary to be. You remember we said the verb in the passive is composed of to be plus the past participle. Here is to be, and here is the past participle. Here is to be again, and here is the past participle. Now, you will notice that we have is singular here, and are plural here. Why? It's because of the subject, which becomes here students' progress. Students' progress is singular, and schools are visited. Schools is plural. This is why we select either is or are. As for the tense, it is present. Now let's analyze more these two types of sentences. What are the differences do you notice between the active sentence and the passive sentence? We have active sentence here and passive sentence. Parents, which is the subject, watch students' progress, which is the object. So we have a subject, a verb, which shows the action, and an object. Parents watch, the action is watch, students progress. Now, in the passive, we have students progress is watched by parents, which is the agent from which the action comes to happen to the subject here. The subject again, we said, which does nothing here, because it is passive. The action is done by the agent. Students' progress is watched by parents and parents, yes. And here you will see how the object in the active sentence is brought to first position when we want to transform that into the passive sentence and position it in the beginning of the sentence. It becomes the subject, but a subject which does not end, we said it is passive. Let's do some practice now. Transform sentences 1-8. So you will have a list of 8 sentences in the active, which you will have to transform into the passive voice. Sentence 1. The teacher distributes exam papers to the pupils. Remember, we are talking about present tense. The teacher distributes exam papers to the pupils. Now, if we go back to the analysis we made, where is the object complement here? The teacher distributes what? He distributes exam papers. We take it and position it in the beginning of the sentence. So, this is our subject, exam papers. What about the verb? Are distributed. You remember we said the verb is to be plus past participle of the verb in the active sentence. So are distributed to the pupils by the teacher or by the teacher to the pupils. It's not important. The exam papers are distributed to the pupils by the teacher. Let's go to the following sentence. The pupils must read the papers many times. You see here we introduce the modal must. It's important. The pupils must read the papers many times. So where is the object? The object complement is the papers. The pupils must read what? They must read the papers. So the papers, what about the verb? Must be here. You see, the be here is the auxiliary to be. The papers must be read. The form, the spelling of the word is the same. To read, read, read. What changes is the pronunciation, mount. So the papers must be read many times by the pupils. The papers must be read many times by the pupils. So let's go to the following sentence, which says they should do the easiest tasks first. You know, when you have an exam, you had better start with the easiest questions. So they should do the easiest tasks first. Where is the object again? It is the easiest tasks. The easiest tasks. What about the verb? Should be, again, the be is here, should be done, which is the past participle of do. The easiest tasks should be done by them first. Following sentence. They should leave the most difficult tasks to the end. They should leave the most difficult tasks to the end. The most difficult tasks, which is the object, is positioned in the beginning of the sentence. Should be left to the end by them. You will notice that the agent here, the by agent here, is not very important. It is optional. We can correctly say the most difficult tasks should be left to the end without mentioning by them. They generally devote half of the time for the written expression. You all know that the written expression is an important part in your examinations, so you should devote half the time for it. They generally devote half of the time for the written expression. Where is the object of the verb, the action here? It is half of the time. Half of the time is generally devoted. You notice generally here, which is the frequency adverb, which has a position between the auxiliary and the past participle, because it's the rule in grammar. So half of the time is generally devoted for the written expression by them. Following sentence. They write down all the ideas related to the topic. They write down what? All the ideas related to the topic. The verb are written down. Are, why are here? Because ideas is plural. All the ideas related to the topic are written down by them. Sentence number 7. They organize the ideas into a plan that is introduction, body, and conclusion. They organize the ideas into a plan. They organize what? The ideas. The ideas are organized into a plan, or by them into a plan. You see that by them is not, especially when it's a pronoun, it's not very important. Following sentence. They use the plan to write the essay. Once the students have organized their ideas into a plan, they stick to their plan when they write their production, so that they don't confuse. So they use the plan to write the essay. They use what? The plan. The plan, what about the verb, is used to write the essay. The plan is used by them to write the essay. Last sentence. They hand back the papers to the teacher. They hand back the papers to the teacher. They hand back what? The papers. The papers is singular, plural, pardon. So this is why are here, the papers are handed back to the teacher. By them, again, you notice that by them is optional. So the papers are handed back to the teacher. Now, dear students, we have come to the end of this lesson, so I tell you goodbye and see you next time.
شكرا على المشاهدة. لا تنسوا الاشتراك في القناة، الضغط على الجرس، الإعجاب بالفيديو.